At my sister's wedding, everyone laughed at me, my dress, my shoes, even my date. They thought I was the family failure, the one who'd never amount to anything. But they stopped laughing when the sound of helicopter blades roared behind them, and I stepped out, holding my head high. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Mara Linton, and I've always been the other sister. My older sister, Alara, was the golden one, top of her class, beauty queen, and the first to buy a house. My parents worshipped her. They'd brag about her new job, her fancy car, her fiancé. When it came to me, they'd say things like, "Mara's still figuring things out." I wasn't lost. I just took a different path. I dropped out of college and started a small aviation logistics company. My family thought it was a joke. Planes? Really? My dad said once. You can't even stick to one thing, Mara. They never asked how I was doing. They just assumed I'd failed. So when Alara's wedding came around, I expected the whispers. Still, I showed up. I wore a light blue dress I designed myself, simple but elegant. The moment I walked in, I could feel the eyes. My aunt leaned over and whispered to my mom, and they both laughed. My mom tried to hide her smile, but didn't do a good job. At dinner, Alara's fiancé, Dean, made a toast. He thanked everyone for believing in them, and joked that he was glad Alara didn't take advice from the adventurous Linton sister. Everyone laughed, even my parents. I sat there, pretending not to hear. Every laugh felt like a small cut. Every glance reminded me of my place, the family disappointment. I could have left. I almost did, but something in me decided to stay. I wanted them to see me, really see me, for the first time. When the dancing started, I quietly stepped outside and made a quick call. 10 minutes later, the music stopped because of a loud noise in the distance. People turned their heads, squinting at the sky. A helicopter was descending just beyond the garden. Guests gasped. Some covered their drinks. Alara frowned and said, "Who would do something so tacky at my wedding?" The helicopter landed, kicking up dust and flower petals. The door opened, and I stepped out. The same people who'd laughed at me stood frozen. My hair whipped in the wind, my dress glowing under the evening sun. I didn't say a word. I just walked past them, calm and steady. The laughter was gone. For the first time in my life, they looked at me not with pity, but with shock and maybe a little respect. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about finally standing tall and letting them know I'd been flying higher than they ever imagined. Growing up, I was always compared to Alara. She was perfect in every way, top of her class, confident and beautiful. Everyone adored her. My parents spoke her name like it was something sacred. Every photo on the walls was of her, graduation caps, pageant crowns, framed certificates. My pictures were tucked into drawers or left in boxes. When relatives visited, my mom would show them Alara's awards, then glance at me and say, "Mara's creative, she'll find her way." Creative was their polite word for disappointment. I liked to paint, sketch, build things with my hands. I felt emotions deeply, maybe too deeply for a house that valued perfection. I tried to keep up, good grades, nice clothes, polite smiles, but next to Alara, I always faded out. When she got engaged to Dean, my parents celebrated like it was a royal event. They talked about the wedding for months, every conversation circling back to Alara. I offered to help, but my mother told me gently, "You can just relax this time, honey." That was her way of saying stay out of it. At the rehearsal dinner, I took a seat at the far end of the table, trying to stay invisible. Alara sat across from me, glowing in a white dress that probably cost more than my car. Dean had that smug confidence people get when they think the world is theirs. He poured champagne, clinking glasses, and started telling stories, mostly about Alara's successes, of course. Then he looked at me, smiling in that careless way that hides cruelty. "And Mara," he said, "what's your latest adventure?" "Still chasing new hobbies." Laughter rolled around the table. My father chuckled, and even my mother hid a grin behind her napkin. My chest tightened, but I forced a small smile. "Something like that," I said softly. My voice barely reached the end of the table. Dean leaned closer to Alara. "Your sister's got spirit, I'll give her that," he said. "Just can't seem to stick to one thing." Another round of laughter followed. Forks clinked, glasses chimed, and I sat there pretending it didn't hurt. Alara didn't defend me. She just looked away, pretending to adjust her bracelet. I excused myself after dinner, stepping outside into the cool night. The sound of laughter drifted through the window, blending with the soft music. My throat felt tight, but I didn't cry. I'd cried too many times before, birthdays forgotten, achievements ignored, words twisted into jokes. That night, standing under the dim porch light, I made a decision. I wasn't going to skip the wedding. I wasn't going to hide or make excuses anymore. Something in me hardened, quiet but certain. They wanted to see me as the family outcast? Fine. I'd let them, until the moment I showed them exactly how far the outcast had climbed. A week before the wedding, I drove across town to drop off a gift for Alara, a set of engraved champagne flutes I'd picked out myself. I wanted to do one kind thing before putting all the tension behind us. Her building was quiet, sunlight falling across the marble floor in the lobby. I almost turned back, but something told me to go up. When I reached her door, I heard voices. At first, I thought she was on the phone. Then I recognized Dean's tone, low, uneasy. I froze, my hand halfway to the door. "Do you ever think about that night with Mara?" Dean asked. His voice was strained, like he'd been holding it in for years. My heart stuttered. I pressed my back against the wall, barely breathing. Alara sighed. "Dean, that was forever ago. You said it was before we were serious." "I know," he said. "But what if she tells someone? What if she remembers?" Her laugh came sharp and cold. "Even if she did, who would believe her? No one listens to Mara. She doesn't matter." The words hit harder than any slap. I felt my stomach twist. Dean said something softer, something about guilt, but I barely heard him. My mind replayed Alara's voice, that cruel certainty. I had spent my whole life shrinking so she could shine, and she still found a way to make me small even when she was the one betraying me. I stayed there for a long moment, hand trembling on the doorknob. My reflection in the brass plate looked strange, like I didn't know myself anymore. Then I turned and walked away, quiet as a ghost. Down in the parking lot, the heat pressed against my skin. I sat in my car, staring through the windshield. A part of me wanted to march back upstairs, throw open that door, and tell her everything I thought of her. I wanted to watch her perfect world collapse. But another part of me, the colder part, told me to wait. Revenge spoken in anger fades fast. Revenge planned in silence lasts long. I started the engine, my hand steady now. I thought of every laugh, every time my parents compared us, every joke at my expense. All of it stacked up in my chest, and for once it didn't feel like pain, it felt like fuel. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, papers spread out in front of me, thinking. Not about love, not about forgiveness, about power. They thought I had none. They thought I was still the same fragile girl who cried in her car after family dinners. They'd see soon enough. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was done being the shadow. It was time they learned what happens when the quiet one stops staying quiet. After that day at Alara's apartment, I buried myself in. My business had started in a small rented garage with a second-hand desk and an old laptop. Back then, I didn't even have a proper office, just a dream and the stubborn belief that I could build something that was mine. I handled shipments for small charter pilots, moving spare parts, tools, and medical cargo between states. No one in my family cared to ask how it was going. To them, it was just another one of Mara's projects. They called it a phase. My dad joked that I'd come home once it failed. My mom said she wished I'd picked something more normal. Even Alara once told me, "You're sweet, Mara, but not everyone's built to run a company." I smiled and let her believe that. What they didn't know was how hard I worked. Nights at the hangar, making calls, fixing invoices, sleeping on a cot in my office when flights came in late. I learned every part of the business, from fueling planes to negotiating contracts. For years, no one noticed, which was fine. I didn't need applause. Then 2 years ago, everything changed. A government logistics branch reached out after hearing about our efficiency. We signed a deal that kept our small fleet busy year-round. It was quiet, professional, and profitable, very profitable. By the time Alara started planning her wedding, I had already cleared 7 figures. My name was on every document, but no one in my family had a clue. I could have told them. I could have shown them the new office, the aircraft with my company's logo, the small team that called me boss. But I didn't. Let them think I was still struggling. Let them underestimate me a little longer. One afternoon, a thick white envelope arrived at my desk. I knew the handwriting immediately, Alara's perfect curls and dots, even on something as small as my name. Inside was a formal invitation to her wedding. Gold edges, expensive paper, every word shining with her favorite kind of elegance. But what caught my eye wasn't the date or location. It was the small handwritten note at the bottom, simple attire requested. It was a small thing, but I knew her too well. It wasn't about simplicity. It was her way of saying, "Don't draw attention," a warning disguised as politeness. I sat back in my chair, the hum of a distant plane echoing through the hangar. For the first time in months, I felt something spark inside me, not anger, not hurt, but amusement. If Alara wanted simple, I would give her simple. But this time, I'd arrive as the woman she never believed I could become, the one she refused to see. I smiled, turned toward the runway, and began planning the moment she'd finally look up and see me. The morning of the wedding was warm, the kind that promised sunshine all day. I dressed slowly, fastening the last stitch of the sky blue dress I'd made by hand. The fabric was soft, light against my skin, simple in shape but elegant enough to feel right. I wasn't trying to compete. I just wanted to look like myself, quiet, steady, calm. When I arrived at the venue, the laughter started before I even reached the garden. The bridesmaids stood near the arch, all in matching rose satin, their hair pinned perfectly. One of them whispered something behind her hand, and another snorted. My mother glanced at me from across the path and gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Mara," she said, touching my shoulder. "You kept it casual." The words hung between us like a small insult wrapped in politeness. I nodded, pretending not to notice. Around us, guests were taking their seats, cameras flashing, champagne already flowing. Every detail screamed perfection, Alara's kind of perfection. Then Alara appeared, glowing in her white gown, her arm tucked through Dean's. She spotted me and smiled the way people smile at stray pets. "Mara, you look sweet," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "That's such a brave color." Brave. That word stung more than it should have. Dean's eyes met mine for a second, then slid away. He muttered something to a groomsman and didn't look back. As the ceremony started, I sat in the second row, hands folded tightly in my lap. My mother leaned over once to whisper, "Try not to draw attention." I wanted to laugh at the irony. No one ever needed to remind me how to disappear. When the vows ended and the music swelled, the crowd turned lively again. People mingled, glasses clinking, laughter spilling into the warm air. I moved quietly among them, smiling when spoken to, answering politely. Every so often I caught Alara watching me, her smile stiff, like my calmness unsettled her. Maybe it did. I wasn't sad anymore. I was past that. At one point, a cousin asked if I'd designed the dress myself. When I said yes, she blinked. "Oh," she replied, her voice rising just enough for nearby guests to hear. "That's ambitious." The small group chuckled. I felt their amusement brush against me like cold wind. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and decided that was enough. I stepped away from the crowd through the open terrace doors into the quiet outside. The music faded behind me. The air smelled of grass and lilacs. I took out my phone, thumb hovering over a single contact. My reflection in the dark screen looked composed, almost serene. Then I pressed the call button. The line clicked once, twice, and a steady voice answered. "It's time," I said. And as I ended the call, the faint, distant thrum of rotors began to build in the sky. The reception began with the kind of brightness that only money could buy. Strings of white lights twinkled above the garden, and polished servers floated between tables carrying trays of champagne. A band played soft jazz near the fountain while laughter rose in waves, rolling across the crowd. Alara moved through her guests like she was hosting a royal banquet, her every smile rehearsed. Dean followed a few steps behind her, already flushed from drinking too much. I stood near the edge of it all, the air heavy with perfume and chatter. Everyone seemed drunk on their own importance. Alara caught my eye once, smirked faintly, then turned back to a group of business friends. Her mother-in-law was telling someone how Alara always had class. My own parents nodded along, pretending to belong. The sound came slowly at first, a low vibration that brushed the edge of the music. People didn't notice right away. The band kept playing, the chatter went on. Then the ground seemed to hum beneath our feet. Glasses trembled on tables. Someone looked up and pointed toward the open sky. A deep rumble rolled over the hills, steady and mechanical. Conversations faltered. The band stopped mid-note, heads tilted upward, searching for the source. Within seconds, a shadow swept over the garden, dark and smooth. The noise grew louder, the chopping rhythm of blades cutting through air. A sleek black helicopter broke through the clouds, its rotors flashing silver in the sun. Wind tore through the courtyard, sending napkins and flower petals swirling into the air. Alara lifted a hand to shield her face, frowning. "Whose stupid stunt is this?" she snapped, her voice sharp against the rising wind. Guests hurried to grab their drinks, clutching hats and dresses. Laughter turned to confusion. Someone muttered that maybe it was a celebrity or a delivery gone wrong. No one seemed sure. The helicopter hovered for a few seconds, then lowered gracefully beyond the courtyard fence. The downdraft rippled through the garden, bending the tablecloths and tugging at Alara's veil. The music had stopped entirely. Every face turned toward the landing spot as the blades slowed. Dust swirled in a golden haze. Then the side door opened. Through the gusts of wind, I stepped down onto the grass. My heels sank slightly into the soil, my dress lifting around me in the sunlight caught the pale blue fabric, making it shimmer with every step. My hair whipped across my shoulders, loose and wild. Silence spread like a wave. Alara stood frozen, her hand still clutching her bouquet. Dean's jaw slackened. The laughter that had filled the air only minutes earlier vanished completely. I walked forward, each step steady and unhurried. The same people who had snickered at me now couldn't find their words. The sky still trembled behind me, but the real shock was written across their faces. The wind still stirred the edges of my dress as I crossed the courtyard. Every step felt slow, deliberate, almost soundless against the grass. The guests parted on instinct, forming a narrow path through the middle of the crowd. Their eyes followed me, confusion and curiosity mixing like smoke. The helicopter behind me still hummed faintly, blades ticking as they cooled. Alara tried to collect herself, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mara," she called out, her voice a little too bright. "What on earth is going on?" I stopped a few feet from her, close enough to see the flicker of unease in her expression. Dean stood beside her, his posture tight, his jaw clenched. The color had already drained from his face. "Congratulations," I said softly, my tone steady. "You both look perfect today." Alara laughed once, brittle and strained. "Thank you. Though I have to say, the entrance was a bit dramatic, don't you think?" "Maybe," I replied. "But sometimes a point needs a little noise." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small cream envelope, neatly sealed. The paper fluttered in the light breeze as I held it out toward Dean. "This is for you," I said. He hesitated before taking it. "What is this?" "Something I finalized this morning," I answered. "It concerns your company." Alara frowned. "Mara, this isn't really the time." But Dean had already opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. The more he read, the tighter his grip became. His lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. I watched him carefully. "You recognize those documents, don't you?" He nodded once, barely. "They're acquisition papers," I continued. "Your distribution contracts, the ones you rely on to keep your business running, they belong to my firm now. As of 9 this morning, your company falls under my ownership." A collective murmur rippled through the guests. Heads turned, whispers spreading like ripples in water. Alara's hand shot out, grabbing the papers. "This has to be some kind of mistake," she said sharply. "Dean, tell me this is a joke." Dean didn't answer. His shoulders slumped, eyes darting between us. "It's not a joke," I said. "It's business. You see, when you dismissed me all those years, I was busy building something that could fly higher than any of you imagined." Alara's face twisted, anger mixing with disbelief. "You had no right to come here, and..." I cut her off gently, my voice calm and even. "You both thought I was beneath you," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "Turns out, I was flying above you all along." The crowd fell completely silent. Somewhere in the distance, the helicopter engine gave one last sigh before shutting down. And in that stillness, the truth settled between us. Heavy, undeniable, final. The garden emptied in uneasy silence. Guests drifted toward the bar or the parking area, pretending to check their phones, pretending not to stare. The band had stopped playing completely. Only the faint rustle of petals on the grass filled the space where laughter used to be. I turned toward the fountain, letting the last of the tension leave my shoulders. I could feel eyes on me, but I didn't care anymore. The moment I had waited for all my life had finally come. Not revenge, not triumph, just clarity. Then I heard footsteps behind me. My parents. My mother's heels clicked too fast, my father's stride heavier, more deliberate. When I faced them, both looked flustered, the same way they used to look when I brought home grades that weren't perfect. My father's voice came first. "What the hell was that, Mara?" he demanded, his face flushed. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone." My mother clutched her purse close, her lips trembling. "You didn't have to make a scene," she said quietly. "This was your sister's day." I met their eyes, calm, collected. "A scene?" I asked. "That's what you call it." My father crossed his arms. "You showed off. You've always needed attention, and this stunt was just another example." I almost laughed. "Attention? You mean the thing I spent half my life begging for and never got?" His jaw tightened. "Don't start, Mara. You've always been too sensitive." That word again. Sensitive. It used to cut, but now it barely scratched. I stepped closer. "Do you even hear yourself? You're angry because you can't recognize me anymore. You wanted me small, quiet, easy to dismiss. The moment I stand on my own, suddenly I'm dramatic." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We did our best," she whispered. "We just wanted what was right for you." I shook my head slowly. "No, you wanted what was easy for you. You wanted one daughter to brag about and one to forget." Her tears spilled over, streaking the powder on her cheeks. "That's not fair." "For once," I said softly, "it is." My father turned away, muttering something about pride and respect, but I didn't chase him. I was done trying to make him understand. I looked at my mother one last time. Her hands trembled as she dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. "You didn't raise a failure," I told her, my voice steady. "You just never looked up long enough to see me succeed." She stared at me, silent, as if the words had landed somewhere she couldn't reach. Then I walked past them, back toward the path leading out of the garden. The chatter behind me was fading, replaced by the steady beat of my own footsteps, the sound of someone finally walking away without apology. The music started again, softer this time, like the band was afraid to play too loudly. The garden looked different now. The laughter that had filled it earlier was gone, replaced by scattered voices and uneasy glances. The air felt heavier, like everyone was waiting for permission to leave. I sat at the far edge of the reception near the old oak tree, half hidden from view. From there, I could see everything. The tables half empty, the servers clearing untouched champagne, the petals from Alara's bouquet crushed into the grass. Dean stood near the bar, red-faced and restless. His friends tried to talk to him, but he brushed them off. Finally, he threw his glass down, muttered something I couldn't hear, and walked straight toward the exit. Alara called after him, her voice cracking, but he didn't look back. The sound of the car door slamming echoed through the courtyard, and then he was gone. Alara turned in slow circles, trying to collect herself, but the mask she wore all day had finally cracked. A few guests tried to comfort her. One of the bridesmaids wrapped an arm around her shoulder, whispering something meant to soothe, but Alara pushed her away. The more she tried to hold herself together, the faster she unraveled. From where I sat, I watched quietly. There was no satisfaction in it, no thrill, just stillness. For so long, I thought this moment would feel like victory, like payback. Instead, it felt like release. A long breath I'd been holding since childhood finally let go. The band played a slow tune, something gentle that floated over the wreckage of the evening. A few brave couples returned to the dance floor, moving awkwardly, pretending not to notice the tension that hung in the air. The night had to go on somehow, even if the story had already ended for everyone who mattered. I rested my chin on my hand, watching the lights sway above the tables. Somewhere behind me, I heard someone say my name. It was Mr. Avery, an old family friend who used to tease me when I was a kid. He smiled faintly and nodded toward the helicopter parked beyond the fence. "You came a long way from art projects, didn't you?" he said. I smiled back, a small, quiet smile. "Took me a while to get here," I replied. He chuckled, then lowered his voice. "If you ever need new people for your company, give me a call. My nephew's been trying to break into aviation." I met his gaze and nodded. "I'll keep that in mind." He patted my shoulder and walked away, leaving me alone again with the music and the wind. I looked toward the dance floor one last time. Alara sitting in her torn veil, my parents hovering nearby, unsure what to say. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I had already taken back something they could never touch, my worth. And for the first time, that was enough. The night air had cooled by the time I walked back toward the open field. The last of the lights from the reception flickered in the distance, soft and fading. My heels sank slightly into the damp grass, and the hum of the helicopter waiting ahead filled the silence between my footsteps. The pilot stood near the open door, headset in hand. "Ready when you are, Ms. Linton," he said with a polite nod. I climbed inside without looking back at the garden right away. The cabin smelled faintly of fuel and metal, familiar and grounding. The seats gleamed under the dim overhead light, my name stitched neatly on the headrest, a quiet reminder of everything I had built for myself. When the door shut, the sound of the world outside softened into a distant murmur. I fastened my seatbelt, slipping the headset over my ears. The pilot began the pre-flight checks, and the rotors started to spin again, slow at first, then faster, until the steady thump of the blades filled the night. I turned my head toward the window. In the glow of the courtyard, I could still see the figures of my family and a few guests lingering by the fence. Some watched in silence, others whispered behind their hands. Alara stood apart, her white gown catching the last of the light, her face unreadable. My parents were beside her, still and small against the noise of the machine. Their expression said more than any apology could. Shock, regret, and something else, recognition. They were finally seeing me not as the failure they'd built in their mind, but as someone they'd never really known. The pilot's voice came through the headset. "We're clear for takeoff." I nodded, my eyes still on the crowd below. My reflection in the window looked calm, almost detached. The helicopter began to rise, and the ground beneath us started to shrink. The garden, the tables, the twinkling lights, all of it blurred into a pattern of color. "They laughed at me once," I said quietly into the headset, more to myself than to anyone else. My voice sounded steady, even through the static. The pilot glanced back, uncertain if I was speaking to him. I offered a faint smile, then closed my eyes. "Never again," I whispered. The machine lifted higher, cutting through the darkness. The noise of the rotors drowned out everything, the gossip, the judgment, the years of comparison. Below, the house lights faded until they looked like stars scattered across the ground. I leaned back against the seat, letting the vibration run through me. For the first time, I felt no weight pressing down, no need to prove or explain. The higher we climbed, the quieter my thoughts became. I didn't look back again. I didn't have to. I was finally leaving on my own terms, not chasing validation, not escaping pain, just moving forward. And in that silent stretch of sky, I found something Alara never could. Peace wrapped in dignity, carried by the sound of my own flight. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given them another chance? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.